You're 20. Or 21. Or somewhere in that range where people keep telling you this is the best time of your life. But nobody really explains what that's supposed to mean. You wake up late more often than you admit, scroll before you even fully open your eyes, and the day starts without a plan, just a vague sense that you'll figure it out as you go. You tell yourself you're young, you have time, everyone else is doing the same thing. And they are. That's the problem. Because there's another version of you, living at the exact same age, in the exact same world, with the exact same 24 hours, making slightly different decisions that don't look important in the moment. He wakes up early, not because he's motivated every day, but because he decided once that it matters. He doesn't feel like working most of the time either, but he does it anyway, quietly, without announcing it, without posting about it. While you're scrolling through short videos that blur together into nothing you can remember an hour later, he's learning something that doesn't pay yet, something that feels slow and frustrating and unclear, but compounds in ways you won't see until it's too late to catch up easily. You both go out with friends, you both laugh, you both live, but the difference is subtle. You spend to feel something now, he spends carefully because he's thinking about what it turns into later. You chase convenience, he tolerates discomfort. You avoid things that feel hard, he leans into them just enough to grow. And at first, there's no visible difference. That's what makes it dangerous. Year 1 looks the same. Year 2, still similar. You both post pictures, both look like you're doing fine, both believe you're doing fine. But underneath that surface, something is building in one life and quietly slipping in the other. Habits don't announce themselves. They stack. You start noticing small things. He talks differently, not louder, not more confident, just more certain. He understands things you don't, not because he's smarter, but because he spent time where you didn't. You hear about opportunities and think, maybe someday. He hears about them and asks, how do I get in? You start comparing, just a little, not enough to change anything yet, just enough to feel the gap forming. By 25, it's not huge, but it's there. He has options. Not unlimited, not perfect, but real ones. You still have time, but you feel it differently now. Time isn't this endless resource anymore. It's something you're starting to measure. You think about the nights you traded for nothing, the hours that disappeared without leaving anything behind, and for the first time, it bothers you. Not enough to rewrite everything overnight, but enough to notice. He's not special. That's what hits you the hardest. There's no secret advantage, no hidden opportunity that only he had access to. Just consistency. Just choosing over and over again to do the thing that felt slightly harder in the moment. You start to understand that wasting your 20s isn't one big decision. It's 1,000 small ones that feel harmless individually. One more hour. One more day. One more time telling yourself you'll start later. And building wealth isn't one big breakthrough either. It's slow, almost boring, until suddenly it isn't. You watch as his life starts to move differently. Not faster, not flashier, just with direction. He says no to things you still say yes to. He walks away from things you're still holding on to. He's not trying to impress anyone anymore, and somehow that makes everything he does more solid. You realize you've been reacting to life while he's been designing his. And that difference compounds harder than money ever could. By 28, the gap is obvious. Not just in income, but in mindset, in freedom, in the way he carries himself. He's not stressed the same way you are. Not because he has no problems, but because his problems are different. Problems you would choose if you had the option. You think about going back, doing it differently, starting earlier, but time doesn't work like that. It only moves forward, and it doesn't slow down just because you're not ready. And then it hits you, quietly, without drama, without some big motivational moment. You're still in your 20s. Maybe early, maybe late, but still inside the window people keep talking about. The difference between the two versions of you hasn't locked in yet. It's forming. Right now. In decisions that don't feel important enough to define your life, but they do anyway. You look at your day differently. The same hours, the same options, but now you see what they turn into depending on what you choose. You don't need to become him overnight. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to stop pretending that small decisions don't matter. Because they do. They always did. And the version of you that builds something real isn't waiting for the perfect moment to start. He started when it was inconvenient, when it was unclear, when it felt like it might not work. That's the only difference. And it's enough to change everything. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The way time feels different depending on how you use it. The way an hour spent building something leaves a trace, while an hour spent escaping disappears without a memory. You start noticing patterns everywhere. The same people who say, "We're still young," are the ones repeating the same year over and over again, just with different dates. The same routines, the same conversations, the same complaints, dressed up as progress because time is moving even when they aren't. And then there's the quieter group, the ones who don't talk about it as much, who aren't constantly announcing their plans, but you can tell something is changing for them. They're harder to reach, not because they don't care, but because their time is allocated differently now. They've started to treat their days like something that matters. You realize building wealth isn't just about money, it's about control. Control over your time, your energy, your decisions. And wasting your 20s isn't always obvious. It doesn't always look like failure. Sometimes it looks comfortable. It looks like just enough progress to keep you from questioning things too deeply. Just enough distraction to keep you from noticing how fast things are moving. You start auditing your own life in a way you haven't before. Not dramatically, not all at once, just small questions that don't go away. What did I do today that actually moved me forward? What am I repeating that isn't working? What am I avoiding because it's uncomfortable? And the answers aren't always satisfying. Sometimes they're frustrating. Sometimes they force you to admit that you've been choosing easy over effective more often than you'd like. But there's something useful in that clarity. Because once you're aware of it, you can't keep pretending it's accidental. You start making small shifts. You don't cut everything off. You don't isolate yourself. You don't become a completely different person overnight. You just start choosing differently in moments that used to go unnoticed. You replace 1 hour of distraction with 1 hour of focus. You say no once where you used to say yes automatically. You follow through on something small just to prove to yourself that you can. And it doesn't feel life-changing. Not at first. It feels almost insignificant. That's how it starts. Quietly. Without applause. Without immediate results. But then something interesting happens. You begin to trust yourself a little more. Because you're doing what you said you would do, even when no one is watching, even when there's no reward attached yet. That trust compounds faster than motivation ever could. You stop needing to feel ready. You stop waiting for the perfect setup. You just start moving, imperfectly, consistently. And over time, the identity shifts. You're not someone trying to build wealth anymore. You're someone who does the things that lead to it. And that difference changes how you think, how you act, how you respond when things don't go your way. Because they won't always go your way. There will be setbacks, slow periods, moments where it feels like nothing is working and everything you're doing is invisible. That's part of it. That's the stretch where most people go back to what's comfortable, where they tell themselves it wasn't for them anyway. But if you stay through that part, if you keep showing up when it's not exciting anymore, that's when things start to separate. The results don't explode overnight. They accumulate. Quietly at first, then obviously. You look up one day and your life doesn't feel the same. Not dramatically different in every way, but anchored differently. You're not reacting to everything anymore. You're deciding. You're not chasing every opportunity, you're choosing the right ones. You're not trying to impress people who aren't paying attention. You're building something that stands on its own. And the version of you that once thought you had unlimited time starts to understand something more precise. You don't have unlimited time. You have enough time if you use it well. And that's the difference between wasting your 20s and using them. Not perfection. Not intensity every single day. Just direction. Just consistency. Just the willingness to choose the harder path often enough that your life starts to reflect it. And somewhere in that process, without a big announcement, without a clear moment where everything changes, you realize you've crossed into something different. You're no longer hoping things will work out. You're building a life where they have a reason to. And it doesn't stop there, because once you start building with intention, you begin to see how everything connects in ways you didn't notice before. The skills you ignored earlier start to look like leverage. The money you used to spend without thinking starts to look like fuel for something bigger. You realize that wealth isn't just something you earn, it's something you structure, something you design so it keeps working even when you're not. And that realization changes how you approach everything. You don't just work for money anymore. You start asking how to make money work for you. You don't just consume information, you filter it, looking for what actually applies, what actually moves the needle. You stop being impressed by noise and start paying attention to results, to consistency, to patterns that repeat across people who are actually building something real. And the more you focus, the more you notice how rare that mindset is, how easy it is to drift back into comfort, into distraction, into the version of life that requires nothing from you and gives you exactly that in return. You catch yourself slipping sometimes, going back to old habits, old routines, old ways of thinking, but now it feels different. It doesn't feel normal anymore. It feels like you're stepping away from something you've already started to build. And that awareness pulls you back faster each time. You begin to understand that discipline isn't about being perfect, it's about returning quickly when you fall off. That's the real advantage. Not never failing, but never staying down long enough for it to matter. You start stacking days again. One good decision, then another, until it becomes your default instead of your exception. And slowly, almost quietly, your environment starts to change. The conversations you have are different. The people you spend time with shift. Not always intentionally, but naturally, because you're no longer aligned with the same patterns that used to keep you in place. You start valuing clarity over comfort, growth over ease, long-term outcomes over short-term feelings. And it costs you things. It costs you time with people who don't understand why you're changing. It costs you moments of comfort you used to rely on. It costs you the version of yourself that stayed safe by staying the same. But what you get in return is something most people never experience until much later, if at all. You get control. You get direction. You get the ability to look at your life and know that it's moving somewhere because of your decisions, not in spite of them. And that feeling, once you have it, doesn't let you go back completely. Even on your worst days, even when you're tired, even when things don't go as planned, there's a part of you that knows what you're building and why it matters. And that part keeps showing up. That part keeps choosing the harder option when it counts. And over time, that becomes who you are. Not someone trying to escape wasting your 20s, but someone actively using them, deliberately, consistently, turning time into something that lasts beyond the moment. And when you look back, not from some distant future, but just a few years ahead, you'll see the difference clearly. Not in one big moment, not in a single achievement, but in the accumulation of choices that shaped everything. And you'll understand that the gap between wasting your 20s and building wealth was never about luck, or talent, or timing. It was always about decisions. Small ones. Repeated. Every day.